December 20th, 1943, 20,000 feet above northern Germany. The world is a frozen, vibrating cage of plexiglass and aluminum. The PFD-1's canopy is filmed with ice at the edges. The Merlin engine howls at full power. The young pilot's gloved hand twitches on the control stick, sweat soaking the lining despite the bitter cold. He is 19 years old. This is his first deep mission into the Reich. Ahead, the distant silver shapes of American bombers crawl toward Bremen. Behind him, a dark speck grows larger. Hunting a Messerschmitt Bf-109, veteran, confident, closing fast. Tracers cross the sky in bright, green-white lines, each one a thin, burning possibility of death. The first burst misses by meters. The next will not. Every page of training, every briefing, every tactic drilled into him says the same thing. Hold formation. Stay with your element. Don't break away. Instead, with fuel dropping and seconds left to live, the 19-year-old does something no manual recommends. He points his Mustang straight down. To understand why this instinctive dive will help change the way fighters fight for decades to come, we first need to understand the crisis in the skies over Europe in the winter of 1943. By the winter of 1943, the air war over Europe has reached a breaking point. What began as a confident promise that precision daylight bombing could cripple German industry and shorten the war has turned into an increasingly desperate struggle for survival. Every deep mission into Germany comes with a cost that American commanders can no longer ignore. The fundamental problem is simple. The bombers are going too far, and the escorts cannot follow. In theory, the 8th Air Force's strategy is sound. Hundreds of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, armed with heavy defensive guns and flying in tight box formations, are supposed to fight their way to the target and home again. But theory collapses under the weight of German experience. Once the bombers cross into the heart of the Reich beyond the range of American fighters, the Luftwaffe descends on them with disciplined, lethal precision. The year's worst warning comes in August during the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids. 60 bombers are lost in a single day, hundreds of airmen killed, captured, or missing. In October, another strike on Schweinfurt ends with 62 more bombers destroyed. Loss rates approach 20%. Crews begin to whisper among themselves that no one survives 25 missions. Some calculate their odds in quiet private notebooks. The math is unforgiving. The escorts P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings are powerful fighters, but they simply cannot stay with the bombers deep into Germany. Fuel limits force them to turn back near the border. That moment, visible from thousands of feet below, is the moment German fighter squadrons have been waiting for. As soon as the American escorts peel away, Bf-19s and FW-190s rise in coordinated waves, attacking from multiple angles, treading the bomber formations with cannon fire. Commanders in England know they need long-range escort fighters, north. American aviation has just delivered the P-51 Mustang, powered by a Packard-built Merlin engine. It has the range to escort bombers to Berlin and home again. On paper, the crisis seems close to being solved, but aircraft range is only half the problem. Dr. Rigid, updated, and enforced with absolute authority, poses another threat entirely. The American fighter manual was written in an era before modern air combat. Senior officers who trained in the 1920s and early 1930s believed in disciplined formations, symmetrical maneuvers, and coordinated attacks. Pilots were taught to stay in position no matter what. Breaking formation was reckless. Individual initiative was discouraged. The system valued obedience over improvisation. German pilots follow a very different philosophy. Their doctrine, refined during years of war in Spain, Poland, France, and the Soviet Union, emphasizes fluid formations, decentralized decision-making, and energy-based maneuvering. The Finger 4 formation, developed by Luftwaffe aces like Werner Mulders, allows pilots far more freedom of movement, better visibility, and greater tactical flexibility. German fighters attack from greater distances, with higher speeds, and with more aggressive vertical maneuvers. They dictate the terms of engagement. The result is devastating. In late 1943, Experienced Luftwaffe pilots average 3 to 4 kills for every aircraft they lose. Some aces record 10-to-1 ratios or higher. American after-action reports revealed the same pattern. U.S. fighters are being consistently outmaneuvered. Pilots fly disciplined formations into fluid attacks they cannot counter. Training emphasizes the wrong strengths. Doctrine is failing in real time, yet inside briefing rooms, resistance to change is strong. Commanders insist that pilots simply lack discipline or flight hours. They push for more practice, tighter formations, stricter adherence to the manual. Few officers consider that the manual itself may be the problem. Into this environmenta. War of attrition fought in the thin air above Europe. Waves of new American pilots. Many are barely out of high school. Some have a few hundred flight hours. Others have never left the United States before boarding a troop ship for England. They step into combat against veterans who have survived hundreds of missions and mastered. The sky among these young pilots is the 19-year-old, flying a freezing Mustang toward Bremen on his first deep mission. He carries the weight of doctrine on his shoulders. Hold formation, trust your element leader, follow the manual. Every briefing reminds him of the stakes. If he breaks formation, he risks the lives of the bombers he protects. Even for a moment, he risks his own. The air war has become a race between loss rates and innovation. American industry can build aircraft quickly, but it cannot train combat-ready pilots at the same pace. The Luftwaffe, though bleeding from the Eastern Front, still fields experienced aces who exploit every weakness in American tactics. Something has to change, and it will, because on an icy morning over Germany, a 19-year-old pilot is about to make a decision that no manual author, no senior commander, no tactician at the Air Corps Tactical School ever imagined a rookie would make. A decision that begins with a single thought. I cannot survive by doing what the book says. The young pilot, who will soon break every rule in the book, did not grow up in a world of doctrine, strategy, or military theory. His beginnings were far simpler, shaped by the quiet rhythms of rural America long before he ever saw the frozen skies of Europe. He is a child of the Appalachian foothills, an isolated stretch of country where survival depends on instinct as much as on skill. His father works long hours in the coal mines and natural gas fields. Money is scarce. The boy learns early that putting food on the table sometimes means hiking into the woods at dawn with a .22 rifle slung over his shoulder. Hunting is not a hobby here. It is contribution, responsibility, and pride. And it teaches him something that no flight school ever could: the discipline of stillness, the sharpness of observation, and the ability to track a living thing through shadows and branches long before it notices him. This natural clarity, 2010 vision will one day let him spot enemy fighters thousands of feet away, seconds before anyone else in formation sees them. But in 1941, as the world slides into global conflict, he is merely a young man looking for a way out of economic hardship. He enlists in the Army Air Forces not as a pilot, but as a mechanic. His job at first is simple: keep P-39 Iraqabrews flying in the dry heat of the Nevada desert. He knows engines, metal, and fuel lines far better than he knows the sky. In those early months, nothing about him suggests the makings of a fighter pilot. He is quiet. He speaks with a thick Appalachian drawl. He has no college education, no elite connections, and no flying experience beyond the stories he hears from the men whose aircraft he repairs. Most officers assume the mechanic ranks are where he will stay, but in 1942, the Army Air Forces face a crisis of their own. Pilot losses are rising, and the training pipeline is overwhelmed. They introduce a program that allows enlisted men to attempt pilot training without first earning officer commissions. It is an unorthodox idea born of necessity. He volunteers immediately. What follows surprises his instructors. The young mechanic who seemed unremarkable in the hangar becomes almost instinctive in the cockpit. He learns quickly. His reactions are sharp. His sense of spatial awareness tested. Under stress, turbulence, and spins is exceptional. He has the rare combination of calm nerves and aggressive precision that distinguishes a potential fighter pilot from a merely adequate one. Graduation earns him not just wings, but a commission. In the spring of 1943, he begins the journey across the Atlantic, assigned to a fighter group destined for the sharp edge of the air war. Escort duty for the bomber stream heading deep into Germany. England is cold, wet, and tense. Airfields sprawl. Across the countryside, each one a small city of aluminum. Fuel trucks, operation shacks, and restless young men waiting for their turn to fly into danger. He is assigned to a unit filled with pilots who, on the surface, seem different from him. Many are college-educated. Some took flying lessons before the war. Others come from families with means, but the war levels them all. Once the wheels leave, the runway backgrounds lose significance. Survival depends on skill, discipline, the ability to stay alive when everything goes wrong. The aircraft assigned to him is a P-51B Mustang, sleek, long-ranged, deceptively fast. He names it after the girl he left behind, an old American tradition among fighter pilots who know the odds of returning home but choose to hope anyway. His Mustang becomes both weapon and refuge. A small metal world he must learn to trust completely. Training flights in England reinforce the doctrine that defines American fighter operations. Strict formation discipline, coordinated turns, textbook maneuvers, and unwavering loyalty to the manual. In the briefing rooms, senior officers emphasize again and again that survival depends on teamwork, not improvisation. Pilots are warned never to dive away from the enemy, never to break formation without orders, never to prioritize instinct over doctrine, but the new pilot senses something the manual does not address. Even on routine patrols, he watches the German fighters move with a different kind of freedom fluid, vertical, unpredictable. He sees how the Luftwaffe uses altitude and energy, how they accelerate into attacks and vanish just as quickly. He studies their behavior in the sky with the same quiet focus he once used to track animals through dense woods, and he wonders, silently, if the American way of fighting is too rigid for this war. By late 1943, the bomber loss rates weigh heavily. On him, debriefings list the names of crews that never returned. Empty chairs at breakfast grow more common. Every squadron carries the unspoken truth. Once they cross into Germany, the enemy's skill and tactics dominate the sky. The 19-year-old pilot has flown only a handful of missions, but he already feels the pressure that every escort pilot knows. His job is not simply to fight. It is to protect the bomber's massive vulnerable machines, carrying 10 men each. If he fails, those 10 men die. On the morning of December 20th, he walks toward his Mustang in the cold pre-dawn air, bombers already rumbling in the distance. He checks the wings, the tires, the control surfaces. He knows the aircraft intimately, knows its strengths. He knows its limits, or at least the limits he has been taught. He does not know that in a few hours, those limits will be rewritten. He climbs the ladder, pulls himself into the cockpit, straps in, and takes a breath as the Merlin engine comes. Alive, the squadron begins to roll toward the runway, a line of Mustangs disappearing into the pale winter horizon. This mission will carry him deep into German airspace, far beyond the safety of familiar patterns and doctrine. And somewhere over Bremen, he will face a choice that no manual has prepared him for. A choice that will begin with a burst of enemy fire. A dive that should be fatal, and an instinct he cannot ignore. Angle 1, the human angle, youth, fear, and the weight of responsibility at 19. He is barely older than the mechanics who service his aircraft. Many of the bomber crews he protects are in their early 20s. The officers commanding them are rarely older than 30. War compresses age, it accelerates responsibility, strips away the illusion of invincibility. On the ground, he jokes with the others, keeps his voice calm, maintains the quiet confidence expected of a fighter pilot. But once in the cockpit, once the canopy locks and the engine noise fills the world, there is no hiding from the truth. Every mission could be the one that ends with a fireball spiraling toward the earth. Combat has a strange effect on young pilots. Some freeze, some panic. Others become hyper-focused, sharpening into versions of themselves they never knew existed. A is one of the latter. When tracers appear behind him or the radio erupts with calls for help, his world shrinks to a tunnel of instinct and reaction. It's not recklessness, dash clarity. Yet beneath that clarity lies something deeper, a quiet, constant fear. Not the kind that paralyzes, but the kind that sharpens everything, the cold metal under his gloves, the smell of oil in the cockpit, the way the sky seems too wide to survive in. Fear does not control him, keeps him alive. The pressure he carries is immense. Bomber crews depend on him. If he misses a threat or hesitates, 10 men in a flying fortress may never return. The responsibility is far greater than any 19-year-old should bear, yet thousands of them carried it daily over Europe. This weight forms the human core of what happens next. When the German fighter closes in behind him, doctrine speaks. With the voice of his instructors, instinct speaks with the memory of every mission that ended in flames. And fear sharpens both, forcing him to choose between obedience and survival. Angle to the tactical angle. Doctrine versus reality. American fighter doctrine in 1943 is a relic and artifact from an earlier age. The manual emphasizes order, symmetry, precision. Formation flying is treated almost as a sacred practice, a choreography of perfect spacing and predictable maneuvers. In training, instructors repeat the same phrases endlessly. Stay with your element. Break only on command. Maintain position at all costs. The idea is simple. A disciplined formation is stronger than any lone fighter, but war rarely respects doctrine. German pilots exploit the rigidity of American formations. They understand that a tightly organized formation becomes predictable. Predictable formations are easy to attack. When American fighters try to turn as a unit, the Germans slip through gaps. When Americans stay in line to protect bombers, the Germans dive through the formation and climb away before the escorts can react. The Luftwaffe's looser formations allow each pilot to maneuver freely. Their doctrine encourages initiative. Attack when the opportunity appears. Disengage when the fight turns against you. Climb to regain energy and strike again from advantage. Speed and altitude energy are the currency of survival. American doctrine teaches pilots to preserve position. German doctrine teaches pilots to preserve advantage. The young pilot has been trained in the American system, but even early in his first missions, he senses the mismatch. When he tries to turn with German fighters, he loses energy. When he stays in formation, he feels predictable, exposed. He survives these missions, but he sees the flaws. He feels them on the mission to Bremen. These tensions will erupt in a single moment, a moment when doctrine collides with reality at 450 miles per hour. Asterisk. Angle 3. The technical angle. The hidden nature of the Mustang, the P-51 Mustang, is a masterpiece of wartime engineering. But in late 1943, its full capabilities are not yet understood by its own pilots. It carries the Packard-built Merlin engine, adapted from Britain's Rolls-Royce design, paired with a two-stage supercharger that gives it extraordinary high-altitude performance. Its long wings and aerodynamic efficiency allow it to reach targets deep inside Germany. But there is another side to the Mustang one no manual describes. At extreme speeds, especially in steep dives, the aircraft behaves differently. Aerodynamic forces stiffen the controls. The wings flex under pressure. The supercharger continues forcing air into the engine even as altitude drops rapidly, sustaining power in ways few pilots expect. At speeds above 450 miles per hour, the Mustang accelerates faster than almost any fighter in Europe, yet this phenomenon is barely documented. Few American pilots dare push the aircraft into such extremes. Training emphasizes caution, altitude conservation, and formation discipline. Diving to the deck at full power is considered both dangerous and tactically unsound. The Germans, too, underestimate the Mustang's behavior at high speed. Their Bf-109 has a fuel-injected engine that excels in negative G maneuvers. For years, German pilots have exploited this to shake off American pursuers who rely on carbureted engines that starve under negative G. But the Merlin engine, despite being carbureted, responds differently under certain conditions. At speed, with airflow and momentum on its side, it becomes a weapon German pilots do not anticipate. The 19-year-old pilot does not know this. No one does not yet. What he is about to discover is not the result of engineering analysis, wind tunnel data, or test protocols. It is the product of instinct, fear, and the momentary clarity that comes when survival demands something unthinkable. Angle 4. The enemy angle. Experience, confidence, and the advantage of the hunter. His opponent on the day of the mission is no novice. The German fighter closing on his tail is flown by a veteran, a man who has survived years of war, collected victories, and mastered the predatory nature of air combat. The Luftwaffe of late 1943 is under strain, but its frontline aces remain. Some of the most capable pilots in the world. They have fought over Poland, France, the Balkans, the Mediterranean, and the Eastern Front. They know how to stalk an enemy through cloud cover, how to slip unseen beneath a bomber box, how to wait silently for a mistake. For them, American escorts are predictable opponents. They know that us fighters will hold formation. They know the angles from which Americans seldom attack. They know how to bait them into speed-losing turns. Against inexperienced pilots, especially teenagers on their first missions, the German veterans hold every advantage. The Bf-109 behind him is closing with practiced precision. The German pilot has executed this attack dozens, perhaps hundreds of times. He anticipates the American fighter's defensive moves. He is ready for the standard brake turn. He is prepared for the expected climb. He has already aligned himself for the deflection shot he's used repeatedly against Allied fighters. What he does not anticipate is the one thing no manual teaches.
Ow.
No enemy expects, and no veteran believes a rookie would ever attempt a full vertical high-speed dive straight into the ground, a maneuver that should get the young pilot killed. A maneuver that will instead change everything if you'd like. I can now continue to Angles Section 2, where we explore the leadership, moral, doctrinal forces that set the stage for the turning point. Angle 5, the leadership angle. Command, inertia, and the weight of doctrine. Every war develops its own mythology ideas protected so fiercely that questioning them feels like heresy. In the American fighter force of late 1943, formation discipline is that sacred idea. Senior officers who wrote the fighter manual came of age in a different era nest, when aircraft were slower, tactics were simpler, and formations were the only reliable way to create mutual protection. These men built careers around the belief that precise cooperation, not individual improvisation, wins the air battle. The 19-year-old pilot has never met most of these senior leaders, but their influence shapes every moment of his life in the squadron. Their doctrine decides how he flies, how he fights, which tactics are allowed or forbidden. Briefing rooms in England become echo chambers of certainty. Stay with your flight. Don't dive alone. Don't break discipline. Even as bomber loss rates mount and pilots return shaken by encounters with German aces, leadership clings to its long-held theory. The tactics are sound. Execution is lacking. They believe that young pilots simply need more training, more discipline, more adherence to the manual. What leadership does not see, at least not yet, is that doctrine itself is becoming a liability. Rigid formations cannot adapt to the fluid, high-speed attacks the Luftwaffe uses. By the time senior officers begin to sense this, too many missions have ended in flames. This institutional inertia means that when a 19-year-old pilot dives into the clouds at nearly 500 miles per hour, he is not simply defying one tactical recommendation, he is violating the intellectual foundation of the fighter program. And yet, in that moment, neither rank nor doctrine matters. Only survival does. Angle 6, the moral and psychological angle. Obedience versus instinct. There is a moment in every pilot's life when the manual becomes irrelevant. Combat is too fast, too violent, too unpredictable. Training offers guidance, but instinct, the raw, unfiltered sense of what will keep you alive, is something deeper, something primal. The young pilot has spent months internalizing the rules. Never break away alone. Never give up altitude without orders. Never dive away from a pursuer with a fuel-injected engine. These rules are drilled into him with near-religious emphasis. But the moral dilemma at the heart of air combat is this. Are you responsible for obeying doctrine or surviving the mission? A pilot who disobeys orders risks reprimand or worse, being blamed for the loss of bombers he was assigned to protect. But a pilot who follows doctrine blindly may simply die in the sky. One more line in the squadron's morning report. This psychological tension is constant. On many missions, he sees traces of it. A pilot who hesitates too long. A wingman who sticks too rigidly to formation. A flight that maintains textbook spacing even as German fighters strike from unexpected angles. Some of those pilots don't return. He learns a quiet truth whispered in squadron huts and mess halls. Doctrine keeps you alive until the moment it doesn't. On the mission to Bremen, this truth becomes overwhelming.
Nice.
Drops behind him, lining up the kill shot. The young pilot's world narrows to a single choice. Follow the manual and die or trust, instinct and live. It is not courage that drives him. It is not recklessness. It is a survival instinct sharpened by childhood hunts, long training flights, and the sight of too many empty chairs at breakfast. In that instant, he decides that the manual cannot save him, but his instinct might. Asterisk angle. 7. The test and data angle. The unknown realm beyond the manual. No pilot in his squadron has ever intentionally pushed a Mustang to the limits the young pilot is about to reach. The aircraft is still relatively new, and its extreme speed behavior remains uncharted territory. Test pilots back in the United States fly prototypes under controlled conditions. But wartime production pressures limit the scope of formal evaluations. Operational squadrons rely heavily on manuals, written cautiously, conservatively, and with incomplete data. The manual does not describe what happens to a P-51B in a near-vertical dive approaching 500 miles per hour. It does not warn that the wings will begin to buffet violently. It does not explain that the controls will stiffen so dramatically that turning feels like trying to bend a steel bar. Nor does it mention that, under the right conditions, the supercharged Merlin engine will continue to produce power even as aerodynamic forces crush the aircraft downward. There is a realm of performance data that only combat can reveal. A realm no one has mapped. A realm the 19-year-old pilot is about to enter blindly. When he rolls inverted and pushes the nose toward the German countryside below, he crosses the threshold into this unknown domain. His dive is not just a defensive maneuver, it is an accidental experiment. It's conducted at full throttle, under fire, with life or death consequences. He is about to discover the Mustang's hidden advantage, and the German ace behind him is about to confront a tactical reality no Luftwaffe pilot has faced before. The angles are now complete. All force, human, tactical, technical, psychological. Doctrinal are in motion. The stage is set. The bomber stream stretches across sky like a moving continent. Hundreds of aircraft arranged in tight geometric formations, each one a vulnerable island of men and metal. To the 19-year-old pilot, the scene is at once familiar and terrifying. He has flown escort missions before, but never this deep into Germany, never against the full strength of the Luftwaffe. Altitude, 22,000 feet. Outside temperature, minus 40 degrees. Fuel level, dropping faster than planned. His flight maintains position above and slightly ahead of the bombers. Their roll clear. Break up enemy attacks before they reach the vulnerable formations. Radios crackle with clipped, tense exchanges warnings. Altitude calls glimpses of movement in the distance. Then it comes a call no pilot ever forgets. Bandits. 11 o'clock. High. Far ahead, black specks materialize against the pale winter sky. A swarm of German fighters, Bf-19s and Fw-190s, climbing aggressively to intercept the bombers. Their silhouettes multiply as the sun catches their wings. They're coming fast. The American formation shifts, tightening into the defensive posture. Dictated by doctrine, the young pilot scans the sky, relying on the vision honed years earlier in Appalachian woods. He sees movement others do not. A glint of wings, a faint contrail, lone fighter descending in a shallow arc toward the rear. Of his flight, the German ace has chosen him. There is no warning burst, no hesitant probing. The Bf-109 dives with lethal intent, positioning itself directly behind the Mustang's tailplane, exactly where German pilots are trained to attack American escorts. The angle is precise, the closure rate perfect. The Luftwaffe veteran has done this dozens of times. He knows the kill shot is seconds away. The young pilot pushes the throttle forward. The Merlin engine roars, its vibration shivering through the Mustang's frame. He banks sharply left to sharply and the German pilot anticipates it, adjusting smoothly to stay on his tail. The first burst of cannon fire cuts through the air, trailing green tracers that pass so close he feels the shock wave of their passage. He tightens his turn. But the Messerschmitt matches him effortlessly, gaining position with every second. Altitude bleeds away, speed drops, the enemy is closing. His training screams the standard evasive procedures. Stay in formation, call for your wingman. Climb. For altitude, but there is no time. The German ace has maneuvered into perfect alignment for a deflection shot. Another burst will tear through the Mustang's fuselage. Every calculation, every briefing, every page of doctrine says the same thing. You will not survive the next 30 seconds. In this moment of crisis, something ancient and instinctive rises within him. It's the same instinct that once guided him through forests at dawn, tracking game with silent precision. It's the same instinct that made him a natural pilot. The same instinct that, under stress, strips away everything except the will to live. His mind does something remarkable. Stops thinking. Action replaces thought. Without hesitation, without permission, without any reason to believe it will work. He rolls the Mustang inverted, the horizon flips, the world turns upside down, and then he does the unthinkable. He pulls back hard on the stick. The Mustang's nose points straight down directly toward the German countryside thousands of feet below. It is a maneuver instructors warn against, a maneuver pilots whisper about but never attempt. A maneuver countless American pilots believe is suicide when a Bf-109 is behind them, but he does it anyway. Gravity slams him into his seat. The altimeter unwinds in a blur. The airspeed needle jumps 350 miles per hour, 380, 420. The wind screams across the canopy so violently it sounds like tearing metal behind him. The German pilot hesitates. He has seen Americans panic and dive before. It always ends the same way. The Bf-109 follows, accelerates faster, closes in, and fires. No American fighter can outdive a fuel-injected Messerschmitt, so every Luftwaffe officer believes. He pushes his nose down to follow, but something is wrong. The Mustang doesn't slow. It doesn't settle. It doesn't behave like any enemy aircraft the German ace has ever pursued. Instead, it surges forward, gathering speed with alarming intensity. 450 mile per hour, 470 miles per hour, 490 miles per hour. The controls stiffen. The wings begin to buffet. The young pilot's vision blurs at the edges, graying from the negative Gs. He grips the stick with both hands. Fighting to keep the dive straight, he feels the Mustang's strain, metal groaning, rivets vibrating as it hurtles toward the deck. The German pilot tries to match the dive, but the Messerschmitt begins to lose control of authority. Its heavy nose oscillates. Its airframe shudders. The engine claws at the thin air but cannot maintain the same acceleration. For the first time in the engagement, the Bf-109 is falling behind. The 19-year-old doesn't know this. He sees only the ground rushing up at impossible speed. Its instinct, sharpened by fear and necessity, tells him one thing: pull out now or die. He braces, tenses his legs, and pulls. The G-forces hit like a hammer. His vision tunnels, his ribs compress. The Mustang shudders as the wings flex dangerously close to their structural limits. At 800 feet above the ground, the aircraft levels out barely, and the German fighter behind him overshoots, bleeding energy. Fighting to recover slower than it has ever been before, the impossible is happening. For the first time in combat, AP-51 has outdove a Bf-109. The 19-year-old has just broken every rule in the book, and in doing so, he has opened a door no one knew existed. When the Mustang levels out just above the German countryside, the world inside the cockpit is a narrow tunnel of sound and pressure. The young pilot's ears ring from the dive. His arms burn from the force it took to pull the aircraft out. His breath comes in sharp, uneven bursts. But he is alive against every prediction, against every line of doctrine, against everything he was told to believe. He shoves the throttle forward again, instinct guiding him before conscious thought can catch up. Psst. The Mustang surges across the treetops, the ground blurring beneath the wings. The airspeed remains dangerously high, over 450 miles per hour, in control. Inputs still feel like fighting a solid iron bar. But he has one priceless advantage now. The German ace is above him, slow, struggling to recover, and burning energy just to stay airborne. The tables have turned. The Bf-109, that was lined up for the kill 30 seconds earlier, now hangs vulnerable. In the sky, its pilot fighting G-forces and airframe shudder. The German tries to pull up, to regain altitude and rebuild speed, but the dive has drained his momentum. His aircraft wallows, nose heavy, controls stiff. For the first time in the engagement, he is exposed. Patterns solidify. Resistance weakens. What began as a desperate dive by a 19-year-old rookie has now forced American Fighter Command to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Mustang is capable of tactics the manual never predicted, and the men who fly it must be allowed to break from formation, trust their instincts, and fight like hunters, not ornaments, in rigid choreography. A decision historic, controversial, and transformative is about to emerge. The formal shift begins. Quietly, not with a sweeping announcement, but with a short internal directive circulated through Fighter Command headquarters. It is written in the restrained, bureaucratic language of military memoranda, but its implications are revolutionary. Fighter pilots are authorized to employ individual initiative, including high-speed diving attacks and independent maneuvering. When advantageous to mission success, for decades, American fighter doctrine has emphasized formation above all else. Now, with a single paragraph, the foundation cracks. At first, squadrons react with uncertainty. What does individual initiative mean? How far does this authority extend? Are they truly permitted to break formation if it means saving themselves? The bombers and the first missions flown under the new guidance begin to return. The results speak louder than doctrine ever has. In February 1944, during the early stages of the massive Big Week offensive against German aircraft factories, P-51, Mustangs escorting bomber streams demonstrate a profound tactical shift. No longer chained to rigid formations, pilots begin sweeping ahead of the bombers, diving aggressively into attacking German formations. Striking from angles the Luftwaffe did not anticipate, the change is immediate and dramatic. German pilots, long accustomed to predictably rigid American defenses, are suddenly confronted with opponents who maneuver like them. Independently, vertically, with violent bursts of speed and unexpected reversals, the Luftwaffe's advantage in tactical fluidity evaporates almost overnight. Kill ratios climb, bomber losses fall, confidence returns to the American fighter ranks. By March, field commanders begin reporting a pattern that cannot be ignored. Mustangs using high-speed dives are breaking up German attacks before they even reach the bomber formations. Some German units report losing multiple aircraft in under a minute. Overwhelmed by American fighters that seem to appear almost out of nowhere in April, the shift becomes undeniable. Aces with names known throughout Germany, Stenhoff-Bohr, Nagel, Raudecourt, in their diaries and post-mission reports that the Americans have changed. Their attacks come from steeper angles, higher speeds, and more aggressive vertical maneuvers. They do not cling to the bombers. They hunt, one frustrated. German pilot writes, "The Mustangs now dive upon us like falling stones. Their speed is impossible. They're using our own methods against us." Behind the scenes, American analysts chart the numbers with cold precision. January 1944, Kill ratio approximately 2 to 1. April 1944, kill ratio approximately 4 to 1. June 1944. Kill ratio approximately 6 to 1. The Luftwaffe cannot replace its losses. Training programs shorten. New pilots arrive at the front with barely enough hours to fly, let alone fight seasoned American aviators. Using tactics sharpened in the most unforgiving sky of the war, by the summer of 1944, the air war over Germany tilts decisively. Escort fighters no longer merely protect bombers, they dominate the airspace around them. The young Mustang pilots become predators, seizing the initiative, maintaining energy, striking with brutal efficiency. The 19-year-old who dove into the unknown has no idea he lit the first spark of this transformation. He does not consider himself an innovator, does not believe he discovered anything. In his mind, he simply did what he had to do to stay alive. But history has a different view. After the war, technical reports and doctrinal analyses trace the origins of modern energy fighting tactics. They converge again and again on the same moment. A steep, desperate dive over Germany in late 1943. A moment when instinct overrode instruction and proved correct. The P-51 Mustang becomes a symbol of this doctrine. Its sleek lines, long range, and unmatched diving performance turn it into the dominant fighter of the European theater. Historians later note that the aircraft's greatest strength was not just its engine or range, but the pilots who learned, often by necessity, to push it beyond known limits. German commanders, writing decades later, acknowledged the shift with respect. Even admiration. Johannes Steinhoff, reflecting in 1977, writes, "By mid-1944, the American Mustang pilots fought as we once fought, with energy, aggression, and initiative. They surpassed us." The 19-year-old pilot continues flying escort missions until the end of the war. He racks up victories. He survives being shot down. He returns to combat. And after the war, he joins the test pilot community, eventually pushing aircraft faster and higher than any human before him. But those achievements, famous as they are, trace their lineage back to that single moment in 1943 when he refused to die in the way doctrine predicted. A moment when instinct became innovation. Moment when a teenager's split-second decision began altering the trajectory of fighter combat for generations to come, in the quiet decades after the war. When the roar of piston engines gave way to the thunder of jets, the world remembered. The victories, the aces, the iconic machines. Historians wrote volumes about strategy, production, leadership, and technology. But somewhere within those sweeping narratives lies a smaller story, one that reveals how history often turns on moments. Too personal, too instinctive, and too fragile to appear in official doctrine. A 19-year-old pilot, alone in the frozen sky, made a decision no manual endorsed. He was not trying to innovate. He was not thinking about doctrine or testing limits or changing the war. He was simply trying to stay alive long enough to see his home again. Yet in that moment of raw survival, he crossed into a part of the Mustang's performance envelope no one fully understood. And by doing so, he shattered assumptions older, higher ranking, and far more entrenched than he was. War is often described as a contest of machines and numbers. But this moment reminds us that war is also a contest of minds, of instincts, perceptions, and the willingness to trust what you feel, even when every authority insists otherwise. The air war over Europe did not shift because a committee revised doctrine. It shifted because a young man pressed to the edge of death, dared to follow an insight born from fear and clarity. That is the nature of innovation. It does not always come from laboratories, offices, or carefully reasoned theories. Sometimes it comes from the cockpit of a fighter diving through cloud and flak. Sometimes it comes from the quiet thoughts of someone who has not been told enough times what is impossible, the tactic he inadvertently revealed. Energy management through high-speed maneuvering became a cornerstone of modern aerial combat. Every fighter pilot trained today learns principles shaped by that dive, that instinct, that refusal to die by the rules someone else wrote. When the 19-year-old later broke the sound barrier, the world hailed him as a pioneer. But the truth is simpler and more human. His greatest innovations came not from ambition, but from necessity. From a moment in the winter sky when he listened to instinct over doctrine. And the legacy of that moment lives on, not in manuals or ceremonies, but in the quiet understanding that sometimes survival itself is the spark that changes everything. If deep research military history like this matters to you, if you want more stories buried beneath doctrine, numbers, and time, then consider subscribing. Your support helps keep these long-form investigations alive. Thank you for standing with us.